Today's show, we're talking to Dr. Huoston about service dogs, therapy dogs. Let me make sure.
How would you like to help local businesses?
Today we're going to talk about service dogs, and we're going to interview Dr. Huoston and talk to her about service dogs for joy and love of service dogs. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Hope everybody is super duper cool today. So I'm going to be bringing Dr. Huoston in today's show. Where we're going to be talking about, yesterday we talked about service dogs with PTSD, how dogs help with PTSD. And we're going to talk more about that today. Dr. Huoston is a graduate of Tuskegee University, and she's super duper amazing because she's a veterinarian, but she specifically focuses on service dogs, and her vision, I share her vision, and that is to one day make it so that service dogs, the same way you go to the doctor and the doctor prescribes this medication for you, that a service dog will be prescribed to you just like a medication, because dogs are truly medicine. I can speak for myself that when I was in the hospital, when I broke my right leg and my knee, my patella, my knee, that a thing that my dog helped me out a lot. One, just emotionally, I wanted to get back to my dogs. Here she is right here. Dr. Huoston.
Hey there.
You're there. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing super duper amazing. Welcome to the Wolf Keeper Show.
Thank you for having me.
I was just giving an intro. You're from the amazing Tuskegee University, amazing school. We've had, some of your alumni here. Dr. Blue has been on the show, and Dr. Ross has been on the show. So welcome. And then
Thank you.
I was mentioning to the listening audience about how part of your focus is not just the actual medicine, which you are licensed to do, but then your focus is looking at service dogs and emotional support dogs, therapy dogs as a form of actual medication for individuals. Can you talk about that more?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give you a background on how I even got into this particular lane of veterinary medicine. Um, so yes, as a veterinary professional, my goal, my organization, Assistance Animals Consulting, was created essentially to uh, put the veterinary voice in this alternative aspect of healthcare. My
Okay.
father was prescribed an assistance animal by his cardiologist. And
Wow.
at the time, you know, like I wasn't really familiar at all about, I mean, I had some familiarity about service dogs, but it was mainly for CNI dogs, right? And
Okay.
so my dad was prescribed this support animal. Then he came to my house and essentially took my dog from me and
Oh
started,
no.
yeah.
You
And
got
he
that for your
started
dog?
and he jacked me for my dog Roxy. I got jacked, and what can I do? He helped to bring me into this world. So whatever he wants, he gets. So so essentially, he took my dog Roxy, who was just she was between 10 and 12 pounds, little mix, Chihuahua mix, and started traveling the United States. He and my mom with my dog. And he had his letter from his cardiologist saying, Roxy was prescribed for him. And during this process, and once he started traveling the States, there was never ever a conversation with a veterinary professional.
Okay.
From the healthcare provider. And I know because I would have been his veterinarian. And so I'm like, wow, he's getting on the plane, he's going to the hotels, he's going into restaurants, with his dog, and nobody knows her training. Nobody knows if she's up to date on vaccines. Nobody knows anything about this animal that has so much exposure to so many other people. And so I started questioning the process.
Okay.
And it made me start thinking about, okay, what can I do as a veterinary professional to give some insight in this process? And in the meantime, as I was traveling, I started seeing in the airports more and more people traveling with their animals, of course. Some of them had harnesses that indicated they were emotional support animals or service dogs. And as a veterinarian and who can identify certain behavioral issues, when was in the airport, I would watch how some of these animals were either pulling on the leash or just not really under good control, or it just set me as odd, and I was like, oh, this is a problem. And I think that it's going to get worse. And this was a few years ago. This was I think my dad was prescribed his support animal in, I want to say, in 2012. And
Okay.
so, after that, and I was in the airline, and I was looking at these animals. I'm like, hey, this is about to be a major problem, and it made my mind start thinking, what can I do? What can I do to help out with this? Because healthcare providers really need to get some insight from veterinarians before they do these prescriptions. And so, long story short, after traveling with my father, this one particular hotel would not allow him in with his support animal.
Oh
And
no.
and so, we were arguing with the hotel staff. This dog is a service dog, and you are not doing right, and this is against the law, this, that, and the other. And honestly, at the time, we weren't properly educated on the difference
Okay.
between the different types of support animals. So technically, in one sense, to be a service dog, Roxy wasn't trained for a specific disability for him, right? So in technicalities, she was not a service dog, but she was an assistance animal. And, this is really the gray zone. I'm giving you a very long story here, but the gray zone is, how do you train a dog to support heart health, right? When the reality of it is that science shows just owning a pet helps improve different parameters associated with heart health, know? And so once he and Roxy were denied being able to get into this hotel, I had to start looking up the difference between assistance animals, service dogs, emotional support animals, and I had to educate myself. Excuse me. I got a tickle in my throat. And so after that, I was like, I started asking a lot of my colleagues if they knew the difference. And at the time, they didn't. And these are veterinary professionals, could not tell you the difference between the different types of support animals. We didn't really, he didn't really get any education from his provider or, the organization associated with his provider. So we were doing all of this research on our own. And so from there, after I was able to educate myself and kind of gave my dad, the information on what he could do, what he could not do, the questions that people were allowed to ask, what he could answer, what he did not have to answer, things started getting a little bit better for us, right? So moving forward a few years, my dad got really sick. He's passed now. And once he passed, I took a month off from work and just kind of, resetting myself, figuring out, refiguring out life. When you experience death to someone someone really close to you, it really makes you really think your whole life process. And in that situation is when I created Assistance Animals Consulting. And I put thoughts to paper and created this organization to be a facilitator to healthcare providers, handlers, organizations, anybody that was looking at using animals as a form of therapy. I wanted to be able to provide veterinary insight on the process. Regardless of where they were in the process, if it was at the beginning and they needed some education on it, we could provide that, let them know who they needed to go to. If there were handlers and they needed information on what type of support animal they have and, what their rights of access were. If there were handlers that were just getting a dog for a service dog and they needed specific training, being able to guide them to reputable trainers. So many people get taken advantage of just because they don't know animal health, they don't know animal training. And oftentimes people are just out to get money and take advantage of people who really are just not knowledgeable.
That's so amazing. Because I found that to be true. A lot of people don't know the difference. Professionals don't know the difference between service dogs, emotional support dogs, and therapy dogs, because they all are three different entities. They have different legal recourse for those three different animals, and they don't always have to be dogs either. To be three categories. Let me ask you this, Doctor. And I want to touch on everything. Thank you for sharing that story about how you got to this point that basically when you discovered that your dad got a dog without any kind of recourse, it was like that was a service dog. Let me ask you this. How inclusive is that in the veterinary programs across the country and world as far as them understanding the difference between those three animals? Like, did they talk about that? Do they talk about that in across the country?
Well, when I was in school, and actually Dr. Ross and I are classmates, when we were in school, we I don't recall us getting being provided this education on the different types of assistance animals and their rights of access. I can say now, since um, what I classify as human animal bond therapy, since it's becoming more and more popular,
Okay.
I do believe that students now are certainly getting the education on the different types of support animals and the rights of access. I
Okay.
do know that now, even from the American Veterinary Medical Association, the AVMA, they have put out statements and provided information for veterinary professionals to educate themselves on this aspect of veterinary medicine. And there's more of a push for the veterinary professional to provide education and support to healthcare providers and handlers that are using this aspect of veterinary medicine. I can also say now that more veterinarians are educated on the different types of support animals because of how popular
Okay.
this prescription, and how things have just kind of gotten out of control. Really, in some aspect of being able to get paperwork that says, you have an emotional support animal or a service dog, and that's very easy to do without having to do much online nowadays.
And that's so amazing that you can't, because basically, I mean, a thing that we do if a person is interested in getting a service dog therapy or an emotional support, um, where we have them take our test that we came up with. We have them take the canine good citizen test, and then we provide a document that their veterinarian needs to sign, that the doctor needs to sign, and that we sign. But it's so interesting that there's not an official document that a doctor signs. There's not an official document for the dog trainer to sign. Everyone just kind of does their own thing, and then basically, whoever's been doing it the longest is kind of the governing body in the United States of America. Let me ask you this, Doctor. In Europe, in Switzerland specifically, it's by federal law your dog must be trained, so you can't just slap tags and certificates on your dog, because dog trainers have to actually be certified by the government, and then your dog has to be trained as law. Like your dog has to have a rabies tag. In Germany, it's the same way. In other parts of Europe, that's true. Do you see the United States getting to a point one day where by that there will be some governing body that dog trainers will have to be certified, and then there'll have to be like an actual official agency that issues the service dog emotional support and therapy?
You know, honestly, in an ideal situation, I hope that the states could get to that point.
Okay.
Realistically, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Honestly, well, I mean,
Why is that?
there's so
Why is that?
much. Yeah, well, I think that for our government, there's so much red tape,
Okay.
and so much politicking that has to be done to have such an exclusivity and regulation, that it would be challenging the way the United States is set up at the current moment.
Mm.
I do hope, particularly as it relates to trainers, saying, oh, a trainer has to have this.
Oh, we lost Dr. Houston. Are you there? I think we temporarily lost Dr. Houston. She'll be back though. So the question that we're asking is, in what we're bringing up in the United States of America, there's no real governing body to allow a person to have a service dog, a therapy dog, or an emotional support dog. You pretty much can go online and download the paperwork, which is not the right thing to do. It needs to be official. So the question that I asked Dr. Huoston when she comes back. Where are you, Dr. Huoston? Come back to us. The question that I asked her is, does she foresee one day there being a governing body that would require people like me, a dog trainer, to be actually registered through the government? And then will there also be actual documents, federal documents that will require you to have your dog as a service dog, emotional support dog, or a therapy dog? Because as of right now, all you have to do is just pretty much go online and download the paperwork. Dr. Huoston, are you there?
I'm back. We got disconnected.
Oh no, who kidnapped Dr. Huoston? Back here. I'm like, did her phone get COVID? I'm like, what's wrong with that?
Look, no COVID over here. No COVID over here. Phone, person, or animal. Okay.
Person, animal, or phone. So you were saying the question, because that's my concern, because right now people are going online, they're downloading these vests, they're slapping on their dogs. People have friends that are doctors that are writing letters. Like, what do we? I mean, you were starting to say, well, can we, go to the next person in charge, whoever sits in the White House this time, next year, and say, hey, pass a law that requires dog trainers to be certified federally, and the emotional, because there's been a lot of issues with emotional support dogs at airports, because basically airports really don't want dogs on the plane. I mean, the amount of paperwork they have you sign, the things you have to do, and the attitude towards bringing a dog on the plane, they really don't want the dog on the plane. So, what do you see? I mean,
Well, this is the thing. I personally, I don't believe that, the airline industry does not want animals on the plane. I think that there's just so much under regulation, and people are coming in on the plane with, especially if we're just talking about dogs, they're getting this paperwork or this documentation, at the current state, and they're having these animals that are on the plane that absolutely have no training. And even if they have training, there may be animals on the plane that are just put in an uncomfortable situation where they are put in where psychologically they become extremely scared or stressed out. And animal behavior is very simple: fight or flight. If they're not accustomed to being in this tight space with all of these noises, these different smells and different people, their senses are going to be a bit heightened, and the nicest dog may turn to an aggressive dog because they're not put in a situation for them to be successful. And I think that is the reason why it's important for healthcare providers, veterinary professionals, handlers, as well as trainers are all collaborating together to ensure, not only the health of the person, but the physical and psychological health of the animal. So when they get put in a situation in public, they are able to be successful in their job and in their job responsibility. Until there's more of a collaborative process with all of the players involved, I think the airline industry is going to do what they're currently trending and doing. They're going to self-regulate. And I think there's going to come a point in time where airline industries may stop allowing emotional support animals and only allow service dogs, but we'll see how it goes. And rightfully so, until we're able to put some different processes in place to ensure the health and safety of other individuals that are interacting with those animals, even if it's just a minimal interaction, by just being in public.
Let me ask you this. So, in Germany, I'm about to put you on the spot here, because you're representing every veterinarian in the United States of America right now. So you're the spokesperson. You're the president of the veterinarian committee, the National Veterinary Agency, right? Dr. Houston is in charge. So, Dr. Houston, my question is: in Germany, the veterinarians choose who gets to be a certified dog trainer. You just can't be a dog trainer. You have to go before the veterinarians to get approved. Would you support the same type of bill here in the United States of America where the veterinarians would pick and develop the programs of certification for dog trainers, the one which you're in charge of service dogs?
I think I would. I really do, because there's a vast gamut of dog training techniques, right? And some dog trainers are still extremely old school in some of those training techniques. And let me say this, since I'm representing the veterinary professionals, since I'm the president right now, I tell my clients all the time, I'm a veterinarian. I'm not a trainer. Okay. I do medicine, and I understand animal behavior, but by all means, I do not do training. However, with that being said, I do recognize training techniques that are unhealthy for an animal. I do believe in reward-based training, because I think reward-based training reduces negative psychological impacts on the animals in the long run. Yes, like there's some fear-based training where you may potentially get an immediate response, but in the long term, research has shown that fear-based training creates long-term side effects. Okay. So back to your original question. Yes, I would certainly like to see something like that, where veterinary professionals are helping to regulate, in some sense, and certify trainers. But there's already some aspect of that, but still it's very selective and it's by choice. Like the American College of Veterinary Behaviorists, I believe they released a statement for this specific training certification. And this training certification, their process, people can go through this training program, and their process is all reward-based training. The name is failing me right now, but I'm going to find it. It's going to come to me in a minute, and I'll shoot it out.
Let me ask you, so president of the National Veterinarian Association, Dr. Houston, I would like to ask you too, I mean, because every year over 800,000 people are critically injured by dogs. That 44,000 are face bites to children. Would you sit down with the president of the United States of America, whoever the future one is, and say, hey, would you pass mandatory dog training? Would you push for mandatory dog training?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I absolutely would. I think dog training helps to improve the benefit of the human-animal bond, whether that animal is being used as a support animal or just as a pet. I believe training really, really helps to elevate that family partnership, So yeah, I absolutely would.
And then I love asking this question. So what would you say to some of the people that were like, no, absolutely not. I would not be for mandatory dog training, because what if a person just says, hey, I don't think my dog needs to be trained, and I hear this all the time. I have a Yorkie, so I don't feel like my Yorkie has to be mandated to be trained, or I don't feel that my dog doesn't go to certain places like dog parks, and dog's never going to be on a plane. I agree with you. I think that we have to do mandatory dog training. We spend $1.2 billion a year in economic damage due to dog bites, which are basically unpaid medical bills at Cook County at the different public hospitals, insurance claims, animal care control, public agencies that are affected by dog bites. So I'm in support of mandatory dog training. What would you say to the naysayers that would be totally against that? I mean, some of the things I've heard are the cost. What if I can't afford to pay for the dog training? And then also too, just people that truly feel like their dogs, people that just kind of out there, their dogs don't want to train their dogs at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things about the United States is that we're all allowed to have our opinions, regardless of the vast differences that may be in them. If there's someone that is absolutely adamant about not wanting to pursue training, I think it's important to pursue the why behind it. Because I don't think anybody would be against training if they really truly, especially if they love their animal, truly or love their animal, if they recognize how training can help improve the relationship between them and their animal. And so if it's a situation where they're adamant or against training because of financial constraints, then I think that there's something that we should be able to do to support them so that, they can still receive the positive impacts of a well-trained animal. So there's so many different parameters, that kind of play a part in why someone would be totally against training. But I think it's up to us to figure out those whys and put in solutions so that can't be a reason. You know what I mean? And that's in the ideal world.
So in regard, because I think it should totally happen. Some of the opposition that I heard was the cost. What if you weren't able to pay for the training? Is it too draconian to say, well, then maybe if you can't pay to have your dog certified for training, you shouldn't have a dog?
I do. I don't agree with that. I really don't, because I think so I was born in the country. Brownwood, Texas is my hometown before my family moved to Atlanta. And, this was back in the day. And here it is.
When you say country, what do you mean country?
So one high school, one middle school, I think at the time, 5 elementary schools, there was
You saying you're from the country, Dr. Houston?
I'm from Brown, and I don't tell many people I'm from Brownwood, Texas. I usually claim Atlanta because my middle school and high school years were in Atlanta. So I claim Atlanta, but
you're a small town girl?
I'm a small town girl. I had the best of both worlds. I had the freedom of country living, from elementary school to 7th grade. And then I got the big city life from 8th grade on. And so I had the perfect upbringing. But
I love it.
nonetheless, my grandparents had 2 dogs, stayed in the backyard. And, you cannot argue me. My grandmother was more attached to the dogs than my grandfather from my memory, from my young memory. And you cannot argue me that my grandmother did not experience some form of positive health benefits, whether that's mental health, whether that's physical health, because I would see her out walking and playing with the dogs. She received some type of health benefit by having these 2 untrained dogs. I still remember their names, Kizzy and Rip. And so, I remember sitting in the backyard with her on the porch, picking ticks off of her dogs, with her. And, that's a bond. Here it is, my grandmother is sitting here picking ticks off of her dog, and she's experiencing some type of, in my opinion, emotional bond and comfort by providing this type of care to these dogs. So I would be against saying you can't have a dog if you don't pursue a certain aspect of training. Just from my early upbringing, I would be against it.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that, I mean, honestly, and I know this is something that you and I talked about, and I want to thank you first and foremost, because I know you're super busy for taking the time to talk to us. But then I think that's something that needs to happen sooner than later